Good morning, team, and happy Friday. We left off in the Gryffindor common room with Harry and Ron discussing what they could do to save Ginny. And then I wanted to remind you, so the background on these pages, there might be a bit of a glare, but I'll do my best to keep that to a minimum. The Gryffindors around them were so miserable and felt so sorry for the Weasleys that nobody tried to stop them as they got up, crossed the room, and left through the portrait hole. Darkness was falling as they walked down to Lockhart's office. There seemed to be a lot of activity going on inside it. They could hear scraping, thumps, and hurried footsteps. Harry knocked, and there was a sudden silence from inside. Then the door opened in the tiniest crack, and they saw one of Lockhart's eyes peering through it. "Oh, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley," he said, opening the door a mite wider. "I'm rather busy at the moment. If you would be quick." "Professor, we've got some information for you," said Harry. "We think it'll help you." "Ah, well, it's not terribly..." The side of Lockhart's face that they could see looked very uncomfortable. "I mean, well, all right." He opened the door and they entered. His office had been almost completely stripped. 2 large trunks stood open on the floor. Robes, jade green, lilac, and midnight blue had been hastily folded into one of them. Books were jumbled untidily into the other. The photographs that had covered the walls were now crammed into boxes on the desk. "Are you going somewhere?" said Harry. Well, yes," said Lockhart, ripping a life-size poster of himself from the back of the door as he spoke, and starting to roll it up. "Urgent call, unavoidable. Got to go." "What about my sister?" said Ron jerkily. "Well, as to that, most unfortunate," said Lockhart, avoiding their eyes as he wrenched open a drawer and started emptying the contents into the bag. "No one regrets more than I." "You're the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher," said Harry. "You can't go now, not with all the dark stuff going on here." "Well, I must say, when I took the job," Lockhart muttered, now piling socks on top of his robes, "nothing in the job description I didn't expect." "You mean you're running away?" said Harry disbelievingly. "After all that stuff you did in your books?" "Books can be misleading," said Lockhart delicately. "You wrote them!" Harry shouted. "Ah, my dear boy," said Lockhart, straightening up and frowning at Harry. "Do use your common sense. My books wouldn't have sold half as well if people didn't think I'd done those things. No one wants to read about an old warlock, even if he did save a village from werewolves. He'd look dreadful on the front cover. No dress sense at all. And the witch who banished the banshee had a hairy chin. I mean, come on." "So you've just been taking credit for what a load of other people have done?" said Harry incredulously. Harry, said Lockhart, shaking his head impatiently. "It's not nearly as simple as that. There was work involved. I had to track those people down. I had to ask them exactly how they managed to do what they did. Then I had to put a memory charm on them so they wouldn't remember doing it. If there's one thing I pride myself on, it's my memory charms. No, it's been a lot of work, Harry. It's not all book signings and publicity photos, you know. You want fame? You have to be prepared for a long, hard slog." He banged the lids of his trunks shut and locked them. "Let's see," he said. "I think that's everything. Ah, yes, only one thing left." He pulled out his wand and turned to them. "Let's see," he said. He pulled out his wand and turned to them. "Awfully sorry, boys, but I'll have to put a memory charm on you now. Can't have you blabbing my secrets all over the place. I'd never sell another book." Harry reached his wand just in time. Lockhart had barely raised his when Harry bellowed, "Expelliarmus!" Lockhart was blasted backwards, falling over his trunk. His wand flew high into the air, and Ron caught it and flung it out the open window. "Shouldn't have let Professor Snape teach us that one," said Harry furiously, kicking Lockhart's trunk aside. Lockhart was looking up at him, weedy once more. Harry was still pointing his wand at him. "What do you want me to do?" said Lockhart weakly. "I don't know where the Chamber of Secrets is. There's nothing I can do." "You're in luck," said Harry, forcing Lockhart to his feet at wand point. "We think that we know where it is, and what's inside it. Let's go." They marched Lockhart out of his office and down the nearest stairs, along the dark corridor where the messages shone on the wall, to the door of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. They sent Lockhart in first. Harry was pleased to see that he was shaking. Moaning Myrtle was sitting on the cistern of the end toilet.
"Oh, it's you,"
she said when she saw Harry.
"What do you want this time?"
"To ask you how you died," said Harry. Myrtle's whole aspect changed at once. She looked as though she had never been asked such a flattering question.
"Oh, it was dreadful,"
she said with relish.
"It happened right in here. I died in this very cubicle. I remember it so well. I'd hidden because Olive Hornby was teasing me about my glasses. The door was locked and I was crying, and then I heard somebody come in. They said something funny in a different language. I think it must have been. Anyway, what really got me was that it was a boy speaking. So I unlocked the door to tell him to go use his own toilet. And then..." Myrtle swelled importantly, her face shining. "I died." "How?" said Harry. "No idea," said Myrtle in hushed tones. "I just remember seeing a pair of great big yellow eyes. My whole body sort of seized up, and then I was floating away." She looked dreamily at Harry. "And then I came back again. I was determined to hunt Olive Hornby, you see. Oh, she was sorry she'd ever laughed at my glasses." "Where exactly did you see the eyes?" said Harry. "Somewhere there," said Myrtle, pointing vaguely towards the sink in front of her toilet. Harry and Ron hurried over to it. Lockhart was standing well back, a look of utter terror on his face. It looked like an ordinary sink. They examined every inch of it, inside and out, including the pipes below. Then Harry saw it. Scratched on the side of one of the copper taps was a tiny snake. "That tap's never worked," said Myrtle brightly as he tried to turn it. "Harry," said Ron, "say something. Something in Parseltongue." But Harry thought hard. The only times he's ever managed to speak Parseltongue were when he'd been faced with a real snake. He stared hard at the tiny engraving, trying to imagine it was real. "Open up," he said. He looked at Ron, who shook his head. "English," he said. Harry looked back at the snake, willing himself to believe it was alive. If he moved his head, the candlelight made it look as though it was moving. "Open up," he said. Except the words weren't what he'd heard. A strange hissing had escaped him, and at once the tap glowed with a brilliant white light and began to spin. The next second, the sink began to move. The sink, in fact, sank right out of sight, leaving a large pipe exposed. A pipe wide enough for a person to slide into. Harry heard Ron gasp and looked up again. He made up his mind what he was going to do. "I'm going down there," he said. He couldn't not go. Not now that they had found the entrance to the chamber. Not if there was even the faintest, slimmest, wildest chance that Ginny might be alive. "Me too," said Ron. There was a pause. "Well, you hardly seem to need me," said Lockhart with a shadow of his old smile. "I'll just—" He put his hand on the doorknob, but Ron and Harry both pointed their wands at him. "You can go first," Ron snarled. White-faced and wandless, Lockhart approached the opening. "Boys," he said, his voice feeble. "Boys, what good will it do?" Harry jabbed him in the back with his wand. Lockhart slid his legs into the pipe. "I really don't think," he started to say, but Ron gave him a push, and he slid out of sight. Harry followed quickly. He lowered himself slowly into the pipe and then let go. It was like rushing down an endless, slimy, dark slide. He could see more pipes branching off in all directions, but none as large as theirs, which twisted and turned, sloping steeply downwards, and he knew that he was falling deeper below the school than even the dungeons. Behind him, he could hear Ron thudding slightly at the curve. And then, just as he began to worry about what would happen when he hit the ground, the pipe leveled out, and he shot out of the end with a thud. And we'll find out what happens on Monday. Have a great weekend. Toodaloo!